Good morning, good morning, good morning. Yes, it's Michael E. Gerber, the wandering Jew, and Rabbi Levi Cunin, the practicing Jew. And yesterday we talked about the Torah. I was going to be talking about something in addition to that, but I never really saw the opportunity to introduce it, nor do I see the opportunity to introduce it today. I really want to go deeper into what Rabbi Cunin introduced us to yesterday, that 4,000-year-old or 2,382-year-old or 3,296-year-old. I can never get the right number, but I'm sure there is a right number. There's a right number for everything. Rabbi Cunin, I'd like to start off where you left off with a story. And that was the story about the gentleman you put the tefillin on, who had this profound experience of his Yiddishkeit, of his Jewishness. And he cried and sobbed and asked God, how could you allow that to happen, to have 6 million of us slaughtered? What was the answer to that question?
I didn't answer it. I hugged him. We hugged each other.
No, I didn't think you did. Otherwise, you would have gone on to tell me.
Oh, sorry.
But it's an important question.
Correct. And perhaps, as I shared with you in my journey, when I went through my own period where I was forming my own understanding of life, trying to be independent of outside influence to the degree that I wanted to be. That was one of my deepest questions. Having had lost my grandmother, had lost her brothers and sisters, they all perished in the Holocaust. It was so difficult for me to think of Hashem as a compassionate God. And it was such a deep question within me. And thank God for my Rebbe. My Rebbe taught me it's a question that we don't have to answer. We should continue questioning it. Not that we should stop questioning it. We should continue questioning it. We should continue be feeling that pain. Yes, of course, one could read the Torah and have a certain understanding of how life works and see the context of good and evil and give an intellectual answer to it. But it's a question that should never go away. That should always remain with us. It should sit in our hearts and should motivate every one of us to join with each other to create a world where something like that could never take place. So that's the story about that, the story with that. And I did want to share with you on a lighter note, a story that came to mind with a fellow who walked into a coffee store. And the guy standing outside, he says, hey, can I get a quarter for a coffee? He said, sure, and gives him a quarter. The guy goes in, buys his coffee. He walks out and he sees the same guy. He says, hey, can I get a quarter for a coffee? He said, didn't I just give you a quarter? He said, stop living in the past.
Where do these stories come from?
The storage house. Oh, Baruch Hashem. I've always enjoyed a good story.
So go on.
There's something I wanted to share with you, just a metaphor, and then bring it back to the conversation of the Torah. You know, I've had the opportunity to be in touch, to meet leaders of different countries. I met Yeltsin, I met Clinton. And, you know, the fact is they're not kings, but they're, to some degree, the closest thing that we get to kings these days are people at high levels of leadership. There's a certain type of awesomeness about being around, you know, people that are of high level. But I can't even imagine what it would be like to be in the presence of a real king. A real king has, you know, he has sole power. He can do whatever he wants. So there's a certain awesomeness to it, right? Now, if you think about, I don't mean like evil kings, just think about somebody like King David. You know, there's an awesomeness to it, being in the presence of a king. For me, the closest thing was the awesomeness that I had in my interactions with the Rebbe. There was an awesomeness that was just natural when I interacted with him. So imagine now the awesome king has a palace, and now you're in the ballroom by the party. You can't compare the way in which you're there if the king was in the room versus he's in another house on the premise versus the king is not even on the premise. Meaning it's the same king's palace, it's the same king's ballroom, but you simply cannot compare the way in which your awe of that experience occurs when it's upfront and personal versus the king is on vacation in Hawaii. I say that because when we think about the world that we live in, understand one premise very, very important in the narrative of the Torah. We are defined in Hebrew, the world as olam, which means concealment. We are in the ultimate illusion. The concealment illusion. We're getting to find that out more now with what's going on in our world to see how little control we have. But we're living in a concealment. That's the definition of the physical world that we're in. And it's because we're in concealment that our first response and reaction to whatever is occurring is that it's just nature, it's a natural, etc., because that's part of being in concealment. Concealment, what is concealment like? It's like being in the king's palace. You think the king is in Hawaii, but the king is actually right next to you. So that's what's the definition of our world. And with that come all of our questions, all of our doubts. They're all part of that. They occur because of that concealment. If it were not concealed, we wouldn't have free choice. That would take away the purpose of the project. So there has to be concealment. But the good news is the Torah, the letters of the Torah, are the breakthrough from that which is the presence of what's really happening to allow us creatures in the concealment to be able to be awakened to the truth of the narrative of who and what our world is, who and what we are, etc. So when one studies these teachings, these ideas are not simply ideas that one becomes more present to. It's not just ideas that are some philosophers, but they're things that we can observe because of the way that the system works. We can observe it in our own story in a very clear and present way, which naturally removes the doubt. It doesn't mean that there's no doubt. We're going to fight with doubt until the concealment comes to an end. Mashiach now. When Mashiach comes, the curtains come up. At that time, we suddenly see a world where really we're one. We're just occurring differently, but we're all part of one. But that, right now, that's concealed from us. And the Torah are the letters and words. The reason why I say letters and words, because the messages of the Torah come in many different levels, as I shared with you in the past. And some of them are in code, in acronyms, in backronyms. Unbelievable whole narrative just in that, as it's described in the teachings of the Kabbalah. So that's what comes to mind. I have a feeling maybe you have a question.
Well, it's like asking a question about a puzzle that doesn't seemingly have any way of being put together. You said something about the letters, that each letter has many different meanings. I've never thought of a letter having a meaning. Because in English, a letter doesn't have a meaning. It's only when you put the letter together with other letters that spell out words that they have a meaning. But the letter itself doesn't mean anything. Now, I'm sure there are people who study letters in the English language or in French or in German, etc., and so forth, who would tell me, no, letters do mean something, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what you just said. So would you go a bit deeper into letters have meaning?
So yes, thank you for asking that. Very, 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 very important question. So in Hebrew, in the Torah, this is going to be somewhat radical. Hang on to your swings. The entire creation of the universe is simply is occurring through combinations of different letters. When the Torah says, and the Eternal One said, let there be light, and there was light, the letters Aleph, Vav, Resh, 3 Hebrew letters, are actually the energy of light. So think of it this way. What is bringing definition to things? What makes fire, fire, and water, water, and their properties originates in the formation of the letters that the infinite is manifesting for it to have that experience. And this is happening all of the time. So the letters are not just ways that we use as a convenient way to communicate, but actually letters are vehicles of the contracted divine light in order to create everything that is. In a certain way, it could be seen like the DNA is to who we are, but it's deeper than that. And that's only one aspect of the letters. So it's the transmission from that which is beyond finite and infinite through the formation of letters that bring about the existence of all existences, of all levels of existences. And it's a very lengthy, deep conversation that the Baal Shem Tov revealed to the world in the words of King David, where he says, forever, Hashem, Eternal One, your words stand in the heaven. And what King David, the prophet, meant by that was that it is the formation of letters that continuously generate the energy into everything that is, that bring about existence in the way that it's experienced at whatever level it is. It really gets really deep, because if we think about our own conversation, it's a different conversation, but I'm saying if we think about who we are, our consciousness really is all a bunch of letters and words. And it's what is a driving aspect of our conscious beings. Now this is different because that's only in consciousness that we're talking about. But this is the idea of letters being vehicles of energy. And just as one example, the Aleph, I don't have a picture of it in front of me. The Aleph has a line, has a dot on the top and a dot on the bottom. And that letter, the visual of it is also a message of how everything comes into being. The dot on top represents the spiritual origins of all things. The line in the middle represents the concealment. The dot on the bottom represents the way that divine energy is present even after the concealment. And the word Aleph, when you spell it backwards, it means wonder. The word Aleph means I will teach you. So the beginning of all the letters is the transmission from that which we would call the wonder, the mysterious, into the finite. And if it didn't make sense, I understand.
No, it's not that it doesn't make sense. But it's the assumption that you make, that not that you make, but that it makes, that the letters preceded the action. In short, the letters aren't descriptive. The letters are formational. The letters precede the action. The letters are man-made. First, we didn't have letters, and then we did. First, we didn't speak intelligible sentences, and then we learned how to speak intelligible sentences. In short, we weren't born knowing. We weren't created by God on the sixth day, fully formed with language, this construct that you're sharing with me. It came later. It came over time. Man created it. Man created the letters to communicate. Now,
I have to just to jump in over here, because that's not the narrative of the Torah.
okay, the narrative of the Torah is that the letters were first.
Of course, the letters come first, and not only that,
The letters were created by Hashem.
yes, again, letters are the vehicle through which the infinite divine light transmits and manifests and coagulates reality into a defined possibility. So the infinite light is beyond description, it's simple, and it's beyond our understanding, and it's a level of oneness that we could not even comprehend. But when the creator of this universe decided to create a world, the creator of the world, the universe, decided to create the world for the purpose of mankind bringing about the result of bringing heaven down to earth. The creator used a formula and let us know about that formula in the Torah. Adam spoke right when he was created. Adam and Eve were created as 20 years old. That's the narrative of the Torah. When man was created, they were created as 20-year-old intelligent, highly, highly intelligent beings. And there was different, there's a longer conversation to that. Now, I understand that our viewers may think like, well, this is such a bizarre story, okay? Well, again,
How did you know I was thinking? It's more bizarre than I thought it was going to be.
But look, let's first acknowledge the fact that some of the greatest minds of history were students of the Torah. Okay, so understand that although it seems some of the stuff sounds so bizarre, but that's because we're limited beings living in that concealment I was talking about. That therefore makes us right away react to it as this is an unacceptable story. And I get that. I've been through that journey myself. I'm saying that I've been through the journey and I'm back. No, because I've come to realize in my own life, I saw our Rebbe as being the ultimate demonstration of what it means to be a Torah Yid, the Torah Jew. And I saw the shining light that he continues to emit throughout the world through his shluchim and shluchos. And I also saw him as a scientist who worked on the Manhattan the Manhattan Project, and in 1940. So the Rebbe also addressed in his letters, therefore, many of the questions that we have that make us at first react to these stories as bizarre. But you could go to the Rebbe.org and you'd be surprised how many of these interesting questions and deep conversations occur in those letters that, you know, that they really resonate. So what can I tell you? I feel like we're getting, we're with our time, we may be going overboard.
We are. I think we've had enough today. You've just touched upon it, something I'd never heard before. But of course, I haven't studied Torah. So why would I have heard it before? And of course, my parents never taught me that. And of course, their parents never taught them that. And so because we don't have a long line of history of that, I sit and wonder at the story itself, because the first time I've heard that the first man and the first woman ever were born 20 years old. I never heard that.
Created.
Yes, created. No, I understand. Created. I used born, but created.
And Adam did not have a mother-in-law.
Well, that explains everything. That explains everything. Levi, a delight seeing you today. See you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.